Right now, you know the difference between right and wrong. You feel these rules in your gut. They feel like you. But what if I told you that this moral compass lives entirely in a piece of meat the size of a walnut behind your eyes? And what if I told you that if I squeezed that piece of meat just a little bit, you would become a monster instantly? You wouldn't just do bad things. You would want to do them. You would lose the ability to care. This isn't science fiction. That's exactly what happened to Arthur Vance. He went to sleep a saint, he woke up a sociopath, and the scariest part, he never felt a thing. Welcome to Diagnosis Glitch. Today, we're opening the file on a case that terrified the legal system and rewrote medical textbooks. It forces us to ask the most uncomfortable question of all. Is your morality real, or is it just a tumor waiting to happen? To understand the horror, you have to understand the victim. Arthur Vance was the kind of man you would trust with your life. 60 years old, a history teacher for 3 decades, a deacon. He was the guy who bought lunch for students who couldn't afford it and pretended he'd just packed extra by accident. His brain was a finely tuned machine of social inhibition. He knew when to speak, he knew when to listen, and most importantly, he knew when to stop. Until one day, the barrier simply vanished. The glitch didn't announce itself with a bang. It started with a lack of embarrassment. It was a Tuesday. Arthur was in the school cafeteria line. The lunch lady, Brenda, smiled and asked about his day. Arthur didn't look at her face. He stared at her chest. He lingered there long enough for it to be hostile. Loudly, so the students could hear, he critiqued her anatomy with the cold detachment of a butcher inspecting a cut of meat. The cafeteria went silent. Brenda froze. It was cruel. It was bizarre. But the terrifying part was Arthur's reaction. He didn't blush. He grabbed his tray, hummed a little tune, and walked to his table as if he had just commented on the weather. As he walked away, he clipped the salad bar with his hip. He didn't even notice the impact. He just kept walking, unsteady and wide in his stance. This was the first physical breadcrumb, but in the chaos of his cruelty, everyone missed it. When the principal called him in, Arthur admitted to every word. It was true, he shrugged. Why is everyone so sensitive about biology? The filter had evaporated, but nobody looked for a medical cause. Arthur wasn't slurring, he wasn't having seizures, he was just being a jerk. We love to rationalize the irrational. We love to force behavior into boxes we understand. Then the eccentricity turned into self-destruction. Martha, his wife of 30 years, walked into their living room to find a wall of cardboard blocking the sunlight. Arthur had emptied their savings, $40,000 gone in a week. He had bought 3 treadmills that didn't fit the house and hundreds of DVDs on how to get rich quick. Arthur sat in the middle of the mess, trying to stack blenders into a pyramid. When the stack fell, he didn't react. He just started again, his movements clumsy. When Martha confronted him with the bank statement, Arthur didn't get angry. He complained that his head hurt. He rubbed his temples and said the light was too bright. Then he asked if she wanted to see his new collection, pornography. He spoke about his financial ruin as if it were a fun new hobby. Pay attention to what was missed here. Headache, light sensitivity, clumsiness, hoarding without logic. These are not symptoms of a moral failing. These are screams from a brain under pressure. Martha dragged him to the family GP. The doctor saw a 60-year-old man acting out, spending money, and obsessed with sex. He shook his head. Frontotemporal dementia, he guessed, or a manic episode. He saw a psychiatric collapse, not a physical one. He prescribed mood stabilizers and suggested therapy. But you cannot treat a hardware problem with a software patch. The pills did nothing. The therapy was a disaster. The medical system looked at a broken machine and decided it was just a bad attitude. Because they sent him home, the glitch was allowed to grow. The school fired him to avoid a scandal, but removing the structure of the school day was the worst possible thing for him. Now Arthur had 24 hours a day to follow his impulses. He started wandering the streets, he stole candy bars and ate them in front of the cashier, he stopped bathing. Then the darkness took over completely. He began approaching women, then shockingly he began approaching children. He didn't drag anyone into a van, he just walked up to them and offered them money openly in broad daylight. A criminal hides because they fear punishment. Arthur had lost the ability to fear anything. The night the police came, they expected a predator cornered in his lair. Instead, they found Arthur in his recliner wearing boxer shorts and a stained shirt. He wasn't surrounded by weapons, he was surrounded by chaos. Open boxes, dirty magazines, and piles of mail. When Detective Miller shone his flashlight into Arthur's eyes, Arthur didn't scream. He smiled. He asked if they could stop for a slushie on the way to the station. In the interrogation room, Miller slammed a folder of evidence on the table. Photos of Arthur following a student, receipts. "Don't you feel anything?" Miller shouted. "Look at what you've done to your life." Arthur looked at the photos and tilted his head. "I know the rule book says it's wrong. Then why did you do it?" Arthur shrugged. The impulse came. It's like when you have an itch, you scratch it. You don't hold a debate about it. Sitting in the corner was David, a private attorney. He was tired, expensive, and the only thing standing between Arthur and prison. And David noticed something the police were ignoring, a sharp smell of ammonia. David looked under the table. There was a puddle forming on the chair beneath Arthur. He hadn't asked to use the restroom. He hadn't shifted. He was just sitting in it. "When was the last time you let him use the restroom?" David asked. Arthur looked up. "Oh, I don't need one. I just go when I'm sitting. It's more efficient." The police saw a depraved pervert. David saw the shuffling feet, the way Arthur walked into the doorframe, and now the total lack of autonomic control. Arthur didn't act like a criminal. He acted like a drunk person who hadn't had a drink. The next morning, David demanded an MRI. The prosecutor laughed. "He's guilty," he said. "He knows what he did." He walked into a wall twice, David argued. He wet himself and didn't care. That's not perversion, that's neurology. We aren't prosecuting a criminal, we're prosecuting a patient. Arthur was transported to the medical center. He was slid into the magnetic tube, still talking about how much he wanted a pizza. The technicians ran the scan, and the room went silent. There, behind his eyes, was the answer. A massive orbitofrontal meningioma. A tumor the size of a hen's egg was growing in the right frontal lobe, crushing the orbitofrontal cortex against the skull. The orbitofrontal cortex, or the OFC, is the CEO of your moral life. It's the brake pedal of the human soul. Every day your primitive brain throws up wild suggestions. Punch that guy, steal that watch. The OFC steps in instantly and says, "No, that is wrong." Arthur didn't have a brake pedal anymore. The tumor had physically crushed it. The wiring that connects desire to consequence was severed. He had the sex drive of a man and the inhibition of a newborn baby. It explained the hoarding, the shuffling walk, the incontinence. He literally could not distinguish right from wrong because the machinery required to make that distinction was unplugged. Arthur was rushed into surgery. For 7 hours, neurosurgeons worked to peel the intruder away from the essence of the man. When Arthur woke up, the change wasn't just physical, it was existential. The fog lifted. He looked at Martha, really looked at her, and began to cry. This wasn't amnesia. The memories didn't come back. They had always been there. But for the last 6 months, these memories had been data points, devoid of emotion. Now, with the tumor gone, the emotional context crashed down on him. He felt the horror of his own actions all at once. He was physically sick with guilt. The monster was gone. The Arthur who woke up was the gentle history teacher again. Arthur was found not guilty by reason of insanity. After 2 years of evaluation in a state facility, he was released. It was the perfect ending. The glitch was fixed. He went back to church. He held Martha's hand. For 2 years, life was good. And this is where the story turns from a medical drama into a philosophical horror movie. It started quietly. Martha found a receipt in the trash, just for a blender, but it was the same brand he had hoarded before. Then Arthur made a comment about the neighbor's daughter, a little too slick, a little too bold. Martha felt a cold dread. She knew. But the probation officer was skeptical. The neighbors rolled their eyes. "See," they said, "the tumor was just an excuse. The mask is slipping." Even the doctors hesitated. They thought he was a bad man pretending to be sick. Martha was the only one who believed he was a sick man pretending to be bad. Arthur became aggressive. The remorse vanished, replaced by that same eerie, smiling indifference. The police were called again. This time, they brought the heavy chains. Martha screamed at David. She forced Arthur back into the MRI machine against the evidence of the prosecution. The scan appeared on the screen, and there it was. The tumor had grown back. It wasn't scar tissue. It was a fresh mass pressing on exactly the same spot. The brake pedal had been cut again. The implication is terrifying. In science, this is called an ABA design. You measure a behavior, you remove the cause, and the behavior stops. Then you reintroduce the cause, and the behavior returns. It proved that Arthur's morality was entirely dependent on the physical pressure inside his skull. Take the tumor out, he's a saint. Put the tumor back, he's a predator. Think about what that means for you. We like to think our virtues are choices we make. Arthur's story suggests that we are good simply because our biology allows us to be. If you shift a few millimeters of tissue in your forehead, you aren't you anymore. You're him. Arthur underwent a second surgery, and once again, like a light switch, the predator vanished. The remorse returned. The tears returned. This case changed the legal landscape forever. It introduced Neuro-Law. It forces us to look at every criminal act and wonder, is that a bad soul? Or is that a broken circuit? Arthur Vance was a good man. He was also a bad man. The only difference between the two was a lump of cells no bigger than an egg. So the next time you feel a dark impulse you can't quite explain, be grateful for the breaks. Be grateful for the silence in your head, because the line between a saint and a monster isn't drawn in the sand, it's drawn in the gray matter. This is Diagnosis Glitch. Don't judge, scan. I'll see you in the next waiting room.